Hey everyone, what's up? Yeah, I'm going to do this as quickly as I can because I don't want to know when my mom's going to show up. She told me she'd be coming home a little later than usual because she had a meeting at her job for a young kid that apparently has some problems or something like that. So she's going to be home a little later than usual, but I thought I'd get this out of the way as quickly as I can just in case. She might be home earlier than that. I did as you probably read before this, I did my monthly opinions, and in my monthly opinions, I even mentioned this a little bit in the review, and I've talked about this before. Shattered World Crisis, because a lot of people were wondering and kept asking, when is Shattered World Crisis going to end? How much longer is it got to be? How many more issues? And well, recently, as of this week, Shadow World Crisis has officially ended. Now, a lot of people, like myself, don't physically have their copies yet, even though I've been promised an extra few copies to compensate for the fact that due to their delay earlier this year and late last year, myself and some others missed out on some issues. So, like I said, I'm supposed to probably get one more issue. I think basically to compensate for the fact that, I didn't, get the issues when they were supposed to come like everybody else, that myself and probably a few others are going to get to finish out Shadow World Crisis and then restart our subscription or something like that. But the point is, a lot of people are always wondering, when is Shadow World Crisis going to end? When is it coming to an end? When is it done? And like I said, as of this week, it is done. And like I said, not a lot of us physically have the issue yet, but thanks to places like Sonic Scan F, we are able to read the issue and do reviews on it, and in my case as well, finally do another fan vid. Because yes, as you have probably noticed, I did post a fan vid featuring the Touch song from Transformers the movie. This is not the first time I've done it, folks. Believe me, it's not the first time. There have been several times. You could just go to my YouTube channel, search The Touch, or go to YouTube, go in the search area, type in BW Roses, type in The Touch right next to it, and then you'll see the fan vids pop up. I guarantee that. But anyway, it's not the first time, and it's something that I was planning to do anyway when Shadow World Crisis came out, and seeing how long it was like, okay, I've got to do something with this, and thus, the reason why the reason I created the fan vid the way I did. Now, there's still a lot to go. There might be some other pages I might add down the line, thanks to Sonic Scan F, but we'll have to wait and see. But, like I said before, and I've mentioned many times, a lot of people, and I talked about it as well, a lot of people kept wondering when Shadow World Crisis would end. And my thing is, when I would look at Shadow World Crisis, now looking back on it since it's officially over, I think it's very obvious that the reason Shadow World Crisis went for as long as it did is because Ian Flynn wanted to get his magnum opus. Ian Flynn wanted to get his masterpiece. Ian Flynn wanted his end game. That's what he wanted. I know that sounds crazy to a lot of people, but it's the truth. Now, I know others might defend the fact that Ian's a freelance writer, and that by working on other books, he didn't have the time to really finish things and all that. And you might be right in that perspective, but if he was working on other books as a freelancer, and let's say he dedicated a day or so, certain days to certain titles that he would work on, then it shouldn't took him so long to, finish an adaptation on Sonic the Hedgehog, especially on Sonic Unleashed with the Shadow World Crisis. It shouldn't have taken that long, but it did. Now, some might say that part of the reason was the Worlds Unite sequel. Okay, that might be true. But even still, why would that be the case? Why would that be the reasoning as to why it's delayed? Or why it took so long? It shouldn't be the reasoning. If anything, what Ian Flynn should have done, honestly, what he should have done is basically, and this is the truth, Ian Flynn, because if they're doing this right now with the Sonic Mega Drive and Sonic Next Level books, then Ian Flynn could have easily done this with Worlds Unite. And that is, he could have easily made it its own separate book series. That way it doesn't have to interrupt any of the books that, features the characters that are part of it. It could be its own separate thing. Like I said, it could be its own separate thing. Or it could have been its own separate thing. But they didn't do that. And instead, they allow Worlds Unite to be part of this. And it had no real connection because the only characters that remembered was Sonic, Eggman, and Mega Man, and Styx. And that was it. They were the only ones that remembered. Nobody else did. So again, what was the point? You could have easily made it its own separate book series that ran for a year. It would have worked out, or at least ran for 6 48-page issues. It would have worked out. But they didn't do that. And to me, I think that's what really dragged Shadowed World a lot longer. Now, you might also say, well, Brian, if you look at some of the side stories in Universe, they helped extend it even longer too. And I get that. I understand that as well. But here's the point. Those side stories, yeah, they tied into Shadowed World. There's no doubt about it. But the thing is, even though they tied into Shadowed World, even though they tied into it, it still wouldn't have, let me put it to you like this. Shadowed World Crisis, even with the stories tying into it from Universe, those Universe stories still could have allowed for Shadowed World Crisis to end a lot sooner. We didn't have to have it drag on as long as we did. And that's the one thing a lot of people will say, that the one thing that hurt the overall momentum of the book throughout its run with the story arc is the fact that it drug out too long. Now, again, I understand, from my personal opinion, because I think this was Ian's idea the whole time. He wanted to create, I understand that he wanted to have his own masterpiece, his own magnum opus eventful story, or event story, that people would talk about, that even to the point that when he would finally step away and let somebody else be the head writer, that this would be the one story that people would talk about when they would bring up his run on the comic. Like with Ken Penders. Ken Penders did Endgame. And despite all the other stories that he did afterwards or before, whenever they talk about Ken Penders and his run on the Sonic comic, no matter who talks about it or brings it up, the first thing they talk about and bring up is Endgame. And that's a fact. Now, some other people might argue and say, well, Ken Penders did a long story arc, didn't he? Let me explain this. When Ken Penders did the World Tour arc that started in issue 57, he didn't go for a year. He was 1 month away from a year. 1 month. He did it for 11 months, and that was it. Nothing else. He did it for 11 months, and that was it. Nothing else. And as far as the satellite story that connected to it, that didn't start connecting until several issues afterwards. That didn't start connecting, as far as I know, until about the mid-60s or something like that, early to mid-60s. And again, it was at a 10, maybe 11-month run. You think about it. And that was it. The point is, folks, Ken Penders and even Ian Flynn has proven that they can do 1-year stories or 6-month-long story arcs, and they can still get the job done. They can even do 4 months, 4-issue-long story arcs, and still gets the job done. To me, Ian Flynn did this for several reasons. One of the main reasons, like I said, he wanted to create his own magnum opus. He wanted to create his masterpiece. He wanted something that would define his decade-long plus run on this book. That's why he did Shattered World Crisis in the way he did it. He wanted something that would define his time on this book so that when he does step down and somebody else gets the opportunity to be the new head writer, when people talk about Ian's run with the book, he's hoping and praying that this will be the first thing they bring up. I mean, let's not kid ourselves. What do you think got Archie Comics' attention to bring him on board as a head writer or as the next head writer? Someone that would ghost write or ghost edit behind Ken Penders and the other writers there. What do you think brought him on board? His Other M webcomic. Why? Because even though his Other M webcomic was more mature in tone, the way it was written, it got the attention of everybody involved. Evan Stanley still does a webcomic called Ghost of the Past or something like that, Ghost of the Future or whatever, on DeviantArt as a side project. But it was stuff like that that got the attention of Archie that brought her on board. The point is, Ian Flynn created Other M as a fan project to get attention on himself, but he also knew it would help him get attention as far as the comics were, as far as possibly getting a job with Archie Comics or any comic book publisher. And that's pretty much what it is. Pretty much what it is right off the bat, folks. That's why Ian Flynn did Shattered World Crisis, in my opinion. It's the same reason he made Other M. It's the same reason Evan Stanley, with all due respect to her, is doing her current little web series on DeviantArt. It's to get attention. It's to get more attention on them so that other people will offer them more jobs. That's why Ian Flynn did Other M. It got the attention of the Sonic fan base and fandom because of its mature tone and everything, but it also got the attention because of the attention it was getting of Archie Comics. And they said, hey, let's bring this guy on board. Sounds like he does good work. Again, the point is, Ian Flynn did Shattered World Crisis the way he did for the main reason to have something that people will talk about when they talk about his run on the comic whenever he decides to step down. Because let's be honest, he's done nearly year-long runs on the book, right? He's done nearly a year-long run. Well, he's done basically year-long story arcs or near year-long story arcs on the book. Iron Dominion is a good example. So he's capable of doing story arcs that don't last that long. Ken Penders, like I said, did the same thing, near a year long with his World Tour II arc. And then, here's the thing. Ian has even done 3-part stories that have had impact, that have accomplished the jobs they need to accomplish, and have set the tone for the future. And people talk about them. People talk about how great they are, or how they have mixed reactions about some of the decisions, but they still talk about them. Even when Ian Flynn, I should say, was building Sally and Sonic's relationship back up, starting at the end of 211 and basically throughout 212 and up to 222. How many issues was that? How many? 10 issues he started building it up in. 10 issues. Did he need to extend it a lot longer? No. It was 10 issues straight. 10 issues. The point being, folks, the point being is you can get a lot done and it will have an impact. It'll have people talking, and you could do it in a year or less time of making it happen. You don't need to spend 2 to basically just about 3 years trying to create a story arc to get your point across. You don't need a near 3-year, and because that's basically what it was, a month away from being it, a near 3-year story arc, 35-month long story arc to get your point across. You don't need to do that. All you have to do is say, here it is, let's get straight to the point, get to the plot, get to the point of the plot, get it done with, out of the way. If it goes about a year, maybe 18 months, which is a year and a half, fine. But it doesn't have to go for nearly 36 months, for 35 months altogether. It doesn't have to do that. You don't have to go for basically 35 months, nearly 3 years to get to that point. And when you add in your connecting stories from universe like Spark of Life, Shattered, you name it, then you are looking at basically 43 issues. Basically, you're looking at 33.5 years of story within the span of 35 issues of the main comic. Add in 8 issues of universe. You basically almost got all together within a span of nearly 3 years, 3.5 years of story when you add in some of the universe stories. And the thing is, that is not necessary. That is overdoing it. That is uncalled for. And what you need to do is focus more on getting straight to the point, getting it done with, and getting it out of the way. You know, delays with printing or offices or moving to different office buildings and all that aside, you still don't need nearly 3 years to get this done. And that's the problem that weighs down Shadow World Crisis. Now, was it good at most times? Yes. I'm not denying Shadow World Crisis wasn't bad. It was good. The only problem that it had was its story length. Because let me give you an example, and I talked about this in my monthly opinions. When I finally read issues 231 to 247, that's 16 issues, right? That's a year and 4 months. So I sat down and I read through it. You know how long it took me? Like I said in the monthly opinions, about 30 minutes to an hour. Why? Because I had to read through every issue, and that usually takes maybe 10, 15 minutes, maybe 20 at most. I had to skim through, read, and everything, and it took me 30 minutes to an hour and a half almost, now that I think about it, just to get through it. And why? Because it was 16 issues of a story arc that originally was intended to go longer, because Ian Flynn had originally intended for the Mecha Sally arc to be his magnum opus. That's what he originally intended it to be. He didn't intend it to be anything else. But because of the behind-the-scenes lawsuits and all that Ken Penders and others filed against Archie Comics and Sega, he couldn't do that. So what's he do? He goes in the direction of a soft retcon reboot. He uses the finale of Worlds Collide to make it happen. And then on top of that, like I said, he uses the finale of Worlds Collide to make it happen. And on top of that, he not only starts, the finale, not only does he start the soft retcon reboot with 252, but that beginning, those 6 issues, of what is it? Those 5 issues lead into basically what we got. So you add those 5 issues, which would basically served as a prelude or as the first chapter of Shattered World Crisis. Then you take a look at the rest of the story arc going forward, and basically you're looking at a story arc that didn't need to go the length that it did. Didn't need the story arc going for as long as it did. Ian Flynn could have easily started Shattered World with 257, and if he wanted to do a year, he could have ended it, honestly, in 279. He could have done it. I mean, not 279, but 269. He could have done it with 269. He could have ended it there, and that would have been it. But did he do it? No. Instead, he continued on and on and on. But no, like I said, he continued on and on and on. I mean, 257 to 269. 1 year story arc. Boom, done. Everything completed. But no, he kept going and going. Why did he keep going? Real simple. He wanted to create his magnum opus. That's why he did it. I get what people are going to say. You guys are going to say, well, Brian, he needed to rebuild the world, and this was the best opportunity he had. Yeah, I get the world building. I get introducing or reintroducing character. I mean, I get the idea of rebuilding the world, reintroducing new characters to, old characters with a new redesign to the older fan base, and introducing them for the first time to the newer fan base. I get you want to establish new characters to the plot as well and introduce them to the longtime readers and the new readers. I get that. I understand now that the main course of action as far as the stories are concerned is to make it more game oriented along the way. I get that. But really, you could have accomplished it within a year's time, not nearly 3 years. If that was the case, I would have easily gone out and subscribed I would have easily bought the 2-year subscription. I would have. And I'm sure everybody else would have. Because the fact is, if Ian Flynn would at least have been, and I'm being nice about this with all due respect, if Ian Flynn would at least been nice enough and courtesy enough to say, hey guys, Shattered World Crisis, starting with Countdown to Chaos, is going to be a long one. I hope you're ready to be in for the long haul. If he would have at least said that this was going to be a long story arc that would probably span maybe a little over a couple of years, I think we would have been okay with it. Or at least would have said, hey, this is going to be a long story arc. I don't know exactly when it's going to end, but when it does, I'll let you know. It's common courtesy. Or at least here's the thing one thing Marvel and DC would do right. If they know they're going to have a long-ass story arc, overarching story arc, that's going to span maybe several years, they have the common courtesy to at least acknowledge what parts are going to be part of what chapters. I remember in Spider-Man the Animated Series. I remember there, when they would start doing some of the miniseries, some of the chapters, they would put something like Sins of the Father, Chapter 7, and then they would put the subtitle, and sometimes the subtitle would say Mutant, something like Return of something about, like, let's say, The Battle of the Goblins, Part 2. But it would still say Sins of the Father, Chapter 7, but it'd basically be like, it would say Sins of the Father, Chapter 7, Battle of the Goblins, or Rebirth of the Green Goblin, Part 1. And then the next part would come and it would say Sins of the Father, Chapter 7, Rebirth of the Green Goblin, Part 2. It'd be the same chapter, be 2 separate parts. That's easily what they could have done here. It would have been common courtesy to say, okay, Countdown to Chaos, it's Shattered Worlds, Chapter 1. Countdown to Chaos, Part 1 to 4, or Part, 1 to 5. Easy, right there. First 5 issues, that's Chapter 1. Then you can have easily said that the next couple of issues could be chapter 2, and then the next ones could have been chapter 3, chapter 4, chapter 5. You get the idea. They could have easily separated them by chapters. It would have made it more easier. They could have even tied in the universe titles that tied into it as part of the chapters. They could have made Spark of Life, let's say maybe part of chapter 2 or 3. They could have said Shadow World Crisis, chapter 3, Spark of Life. Go check it out in Sonic Universe. Would have been easy. Or said it's, you get the idea. You get the idea. I'm saying it would have been easier if they would have separated them by chapter. I'll give you an example. 57 to 62. There is 5 issues just like the last 2. There's chapter 2. 63 to 60, 263 to 268. There's chapter 3. Right? Okay. 269 to 274. There's chapter 4. 275 to 279. There's chapter 5. 280 to 284, or 280 to 283, there's chapter 6. And then 284 to 285. Or let's take a look at it this way. 252 to 256. All right? All right, there you go. Yeah, there you go. 5 chapters right there. And then 257, 261. There's chapter 2. 262 to 266. There's chapter 3. 267 to 271. There's chapter 4. 272 to 276. There's chapter 5. 277 to 281. There's chapter 6. And then, because it would be the finale, 282 to 287, there's chapter 7. So essentially, what I'm getting at, and I know I messed up a little bit there, so I do apologize. They could have easily separated them into 7 chapters, and they could have easily said, like with Champions, that could have been, what was it, part 6 or something, chapter 6, 5 or something like that. It could have been part of that. All these story arcs that they had, the encounter with the Wolf Pack, the encounter with Dulcie's team, the encounter with Razor and his team, and the side stories as well, the backup stories. They could have all easily been part of one chapter. Separate chapters and separated by parts. Like I said, there have been several comics and comic book adaptations in animation form that have done this. Well, they have said, here's blah, 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 chapter 7, blah, 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 part 1. And that's it. And it works because at least okay, it's a chapter, it's another chapter in the story, but it's separated by parts. They could have easily done, Ian Flynn could have easily done that. And it would have made it easier for us because at least we know, okay, all the stories are separated by chapter, and are separated by chapter. We don't know how long the chapter is, but usually a chapter in a comic book goes for at least 4 to 5 issues. We know that. Like I say, we know that usually goes for 4 to 5 issues in a comic. We know that. But to me, if Ian Flynn would have easily just done something like that, acknowledged that, hey, we're separating these by chapters, and each chapter is probably going to amount to about 4 to 5 issues each, or 4 to 6 issues each. I think we would have accepted that, and we probably would have had a better understanding of how long it was going to go. But he didn't do that. They didn't do this. Now, you might say, well, maybe Ian Flynn didn't know how long it was going to go. And that might be correct. You might be correct there. But you know what? I think he did. I think he knew how long it was going to go. He wanted to make this reintroduction into the new world an epic one. Wanted to make it such an epic one that, like I said, it would be the story that people would associate him with after he steps down. That is a guaranteed fact. My opinion, but it's a guaranteed fact. That is why as I talk to you right now, why Shadow World Crisis lasted as long as it did. Because of this reason. Because Ian Flynn wanted to make a masterpiece. He wanted to create a masterpiece that he would be remembered by. You could sit here and deny it, but it's the truth. It is the truth. And you know what? Ian Flynn, he knows it probably better than anybody. He knows it probably better than anybody, but he ain't going to tell you. He ain't going to tell you because he knows that if he comes out and says, yeah, I had planned to do it for this long, I planned to make it go for this long since I started it, he knows not a lot of people will be happy with him because he didn't have the common courtesy to at least acknowledge it was going to go for this long. At least, like I said, comic book companies like Marvel, IDW, DC, and others out there, at least they have the common courtesy to say, hey, this is how many parts we got planned, and this is how long it's going to probably go. And like I said, he could have easily suggested putting Worlds Unite as its own separate comic book series as 6 48-page issues or 12 24-page issues. It would have worked. Still would have gotten people reading it. It would have worked. But he didn't do that. He didn't do it. And that was one of the things that caused this to drag out so far. And I guarantee you people are going to point that out to him. So that's all I'm going to say basically on Shadow World Crisis and why, in my opinion, it ran for so long. I know some of you might have your own opinions about it. That's fine. But you let me know down below. Comment if you like. But in my opinion, my honest to God opinion, I think Ian Flynn did this for a reason. And the reason being, he wanted to create his own magnum opus, his own masterpiece, the one story that would define his run on the scientific comic as a head writer. You guys know it and I know it. With all due respect to Ian Flynn, I've had my differences with him. He's blocked me several times on Twitter. You know, when the Bumble King forums was up, he blocked me from that on separate occasions. I tried to get back on. That's okay, fine, I understand. And with all due respect to Ian, he's a great writer. I'm not denying that. He's a great comic book writer. But it would have been helpful and a little bit more courteous if Ian would have let us know that this was going to go for as long as it did. So let me know what you guys think down below, though, because those are my thoughts and my opinion why Shadow World Crisis lasted this long. Let me know down below. Comment if you like. What are your thoughts on it? And I'll get back. And